we can start. Fantastic. We'll just wait another 20 seconds for participants to start joining. Okay. I think we're ready to go. All right. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much for being with us today. Some of you have been part of this work from its earliest days, and others are joining us for the first time. To all of you, you're very much welcome. My name is Khalid Tebe, and I represent the Global Climate Finance Center. I am joined by my esteemed colleagues from TNFD, Candice Dott, from Nature Alpha, Dr. Vian Sharif and Liesel van der Weive Blackman, and from Amia Power, Vito Saluto. Now, nature can sometimes feel like an enormously broad agenda, but when you bring it down to the level of an economy, a company, or an asset, it becomes tangible very, very quickly. And increasingly, the question we get from financial institutions and companies are, where do we depend on nature? Where are we exposed to its decline? And what might that mean for risk, resilience, and value? This is the conversation we'd like to have with you this afternoon. We are meeting at the midpoint of the year, so this is a very useful moment to take stock of where nature has reached. A great deal has moved. The frameworks are becoming clearer, the data is becoming more usable, institutions around the world are beginning to move from understanding nature conceptually to examining what it means within portfolios, supply chains, and individual assets. And here in the United Arab Emirates, we are beginning to build that capability as well. So as you listen this afternoon, I'd like everyone to keep one question in mind. What could this mean for the decisions your organization is already making? Let me briefly take you through the next 90 minutes. I will start with where we stand here in the UAE and what we've learned through the work so far. I will then hand over to my colleague at TNFD, who will bring us the global picture and how the framework itself is developing. Nature Alpha will then show us what the data allows us to see, because one of the most important developments in this space is that we can increasingly move from broad assumptions about nature risks to understanding where that exposure actually sits. And then Amia Power will bring all of this down to the level of a real asset, taking us through their own experience and showing you how you begin to move from exposure to assessment and ultimately towards disclosure. So very excited for today's workshop and to go through this with all of you. One housekeeping note: if anybody has any questions throughout the session, please direct them in the chat and we will allocate time to respond to them. So where do we stand? As the official TNFD convener, when we signed the MOU with the TNFD co-chair at the IUCN last year, we have had 5 convenings at the IUCN, at Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, and at London Climate Action Week. And obviously, we've also had virtual convenings, and we've reached more than 100 participants. We've also launched 2 publications, including a UAE-focused nature risk assessment and how the existing financial regulations and architecture make space for nature to be integrated and applied. We signed an MOU with Nature Alpha, so stakeholders here in the UAE has access to the most advanced nature analytics. For the next half of the year, there is still much more work to be done, starting with an executive education program in September at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy, understanding the intersection of industrialization and nature finance. We're also excited to launch the Nature Finance Academy later in Q4 of 2026. Throughout our engagements, we seek to understand what UAE stakeholders have in terms of obstacles in adopting TNFD and using its methodologies. And throughout, we attempted to answer and provide the necessary capacity building sessions to support stakeholders in their adoption journey. One of the key obstacles is an understanding gap of where the existing UAE regulation stands when it comes to integrating nature. And so we launched a publication during London Climate Action Week to support that exact transition. We looked across more than 2,000 UAE assets through the lens of nature, and three things were particularly clear. The first is materiality. Nature-related risk is capable of becoming financially material across a meaningful share of UAE assets over the coming decades. And this matters because it's very familiar conversations about how assets performs, how businesses remain resilient, and how financial institutions understand the risks within their portfolios. The second is concentration. The exposure is not distributed evenly. Water, we've identified, emerges very strongly from the analysis. More than 90% of the nature-related risks identified in our assessment is connected in some way to water. And that brings the nature agenda very close to home for the UAE. And then finally, we talk about place. Nature becomes much more actionable when we know where the exposure sits. The signal becomes clear as we move from the economy to the sector and ultimately to the individual assets. And that is important because an institution can begin asking the most practical questions. Where are our assets? What natural systems do we depend on? What pressures exist in these locations? Which sectors or counterparties appear most exposed? And where might we need to look more closely? We hope that our research provides that necessary baseline for many organizations in this call and in the UAE to begin using the TNFD methodologies and the tools. With that, I will hand over to my esteemed colleague, Candice, to discuss the international landscape. Candice, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Khalid, and welcome everyone. Hopefully I am audible. I just wanted to start with a quick introduction because you would normally be hearing from my colleague Tejeshwa, who's actually on leave this week, but I lead our global market engagement activities within the TNFD Secretariat, and we do cover a number of jurisdictions, but the UAE is very personal to me because I spent a very treasured 3 years of my life living in the Middle East before I moved back to South Africa. And I just want to thank Khalid and the GCFC team for all their hard work. I think outlined in the beginning, you have a really good idea of the number of engagements that have already taken place and how many stakeholders have worked with the GCFC and participated in various sessions and shaping certainly what I think is an important stage of the TNFD work, which is capacity building. I also want to, if we can just go to the next slide, we showcase our adopters. This is actually a slide from our announcement of adopters last year. So this is an October data point, and we're actually busy working on our updated numbers, but all of the adopters can be downloaded from our website. We update them almost weekly. And we now well over, I would say, 780 global adopters. So have a look at the website because I think there's some fantastic organizations that others can learn from that might relate to them in different sectors or in different financial institutional relationships that you might cooperate across the region. I think importantly, though, we look at adopters as one metric. And I just want to highlight, obviously, we have seen extreme growth across the Asia Pacific region that continues to showcase in the numbers, where Japan is still our leading region in terms of global TNFD adopters, as well as public reports. But also the UK has just crossed over a major milestone where there are now more than 100 adopters. And we're seeing that through not just this adoption number, but also reports. So when you become an adopter, it's also the commitment to starting to publicly disclose your information in line with TNFD recommendations. And that is not having to meet all those recommendations, just to be clear. It's about the journey that you're on. So I like to highlight the fact that the TNFD has a a large capital D on the end, which yes, does stand for disclosure, but I also prefer thinking about it as decision making. How does it help you make things that are potentially invisible or not well understood within the context of your organization or your value chain or your clients a little bit more visible? How do you make more informed decisions once you've started doing risk assessment, leap assessment processes? So just within context, some great numbers. We're working on our TNFD status report as well. So we're seeing momentum in terms of public reporting evidence where people, I think, can learn from others, as well as the use of the LEAP assessment tool as a risk assessment framework, helping organizations go through this decision-making internal process before they can even consider disclosure. Next slide, please. So really, this slide's got quite a lot of information, and I'm going to touch on a few aspects because we've been very active, and this just tries to sum up, as this is a Stocktake sort of mid-year check-in. We do our own check-ins, and we're busy preparing our second annual status report. So just to put that into perspective, and many of you will hopefully know that a large proportion of the TNFD is highly connected to the hard work that went into the TCFD. So those 11 recommendations that cross-connect into the 14 TNFD recommendations should be front of mind. But we're doing status report work right now, which is a big Stocktake moment for us. And then we've recently published technical publications that are highlighted on the left. I'm not going to list all of them, but I just want to highlight that a lot of those are in final review phases. So we've closed a number of them for feedback now, including our discussion paper on environmental crime. We've also worked on use cases and case studies. So a big proportion of our time this last year has been connected to evidence of and implementation examples, because that is, I think, where people can see how others are doing the work and how they are approaching this, and perhaps also at a sectoral level. It helps financial institutions with a client lens. If you look at your clients within the context of the sectors and the value chains that they participate in and operate in, I think it's really helpful to look at sector work and how that has continued through the scoping of case studies and use cases. I will touch on the invasive alien species in a follow-up slide, but on the right-hand slide, there's quite a lot of upcoming technical publications. The dates are obviously all within scope of some indicative timelines, but you should see some really interesting results coming out of the technology and communications sector guidance, as well as case studies that link to that. And then we've got continued work going into environmental crime, advanced scenario analysis, which is super helpful for financial institutions working through this, as well as corporates, obviously. And then we've got some investor use cases that we will be producing for PRI in person in October. And a big update will be a LEAP 2.0 update to our guidance. Now, that doesn't say that the current LEAP guidance is going to be null and void. Absolutely not. Our current LEAP guidance is being updated. Updated because we've got more examples. We've got better case studies. We've got some important metrics updates based on our invasive alien species work and our state of nature work, where those have all been pilot programs for the last few months. And then advancements in transition planning and how nature can be incorporated. So that's the top section of this slide, and just an indication of many aspects to come, both technical and very much capacity building, implementation related. And then secondly, at the bottom of this page, we've put out guides. So on the left-hand side, we've got guides that I'll touch on the next slide, but we've got a few more guides coming. If we could go to the next slide. These guides I am hearing very positive feedback from stakeholders. So if you're in a sustainability role within a corporate or a financial institution, we've had direct feedback from stakeholders saying this really helped me have a conversation with an investor, or it helped me have a conversation with our board, or it's helped me present some of the cases that I've been making with our financial teams, with our CFO, that I really was struggling to make before. So people are using these guides. It's a series of very thoughtful questions and how to approach those questions with those stakeholders. Not putting them on the spot and expecting both parties to have answers immediately, but actually we're hearing that boards use these as an example of how to actually go through the work and how they're prioritizing some of their nature-related assessment work. Next slide. This is just a quick update on, I think, an important piece of information. So we've done a lot of work. A lot of people are not often as familiar with our metrics architecture. And we have 14 core cross-sector global metrics, which I've just outlined on the screen. And 2 of them on the right-hand side have had continued work. Kylie just asked me to point out the specific work, and there will be more updates because we are providing final guidance on this, but specifically to the invasive alien species component of our metrics architecture. So that is in collaboration with Fauna and Flora, IUCN, and a consultation with various scientific experts and contributors who help lead the IPBES IAS assessments. And I just want to highlight on the next slide that you can get an indication both from our existing paper. We had a public consultation, and in that paper, what you're seeing on the slide is what we have proposed. So the proposed updates to the language and how these metrics will actually be, from an indicator and a metric perspective, updated can be seen on the screen, and we will be looking to incorporate, based on the consultative feedback, these feedback points into our LEAP 2.0 update that's coming out in October. Next slide. This is a hot topic, just obviously for reasons that are related to various stages of work from the ISSB. And I think it's important to highlight that within the context of ISSB public information, they're proposing that their requirements and guidance will take the form of a practice statement. We've tried to outline on here because I think that there are a lot of information points, and I'll put a link in the chat. They have answered a number of frequently asked questions because they do have an established practice of using the practice statement, but this is the first time from an IFRS Foundation perspective in the context of standard setting it has been used, as well as the fact that this practice statement is also in line with how they follow their usual standards process. And I think importantly on the right-hand side, I just want to highlight that organizations that are preparing for the IFRS S1 and S2 disclosure requirements can already take advantage of how the IFRS is drawing on the TNFD. So the point of the form and the standard setting, and I'll go through the next stage of work, but I think importantly, if you are preparing for S1 alignment, you already have to disclose material information about nature-related risks and opportunities. And our continuing work and the publications and the case studies and guidance are there to help support organizations in making that information understandable and ensuring that companies are understanding what is material information for them to disclose and how they go about that. So all of this aligns with existing S1 requirements, but obviously with the practice statement, it should help align how one goes about doing that and how the ISSB is already drawing on the TNFD material. Next slide. This is the time frame. So importantly, with the form that the ISSB will be using, they will be publishing an exposure draft for public consultation in October around COP17. I'm also aware that at COP17, they will be hosting a number of events. There will be a 120-day consultation process, we understand, for this exposure draft to receive feedback. And obviously within that, they will include questions for respondents to comment on the form and content within the exposure draft. Next slide. These next two slides are really just a quick indication of how we're signposting the ISSB decisions and the decision to draw on the TNFD framework, the 2 years of this research project, and what the board has already discussed. So these are public information points just signposting to specific parts of the TNFD content that I know there's been specific work on in your region, as well as various case studies and various attributes around these documents. So how they can be applied. The LEAP assessment tool for risk assessment to prepare for your IFRS S1, as well as the disclosure metrics and some of those updates. So 2 already available data points that are helpful. The next slide, I think, also highlights a few more documents. So again, drawing on the engagement aspects with Indigenous peoples, local communities, and affected stakeholders, as well as scenario analysis. So understanding a common language, understanding existing guidance on various topics and how that has and will make its way into the content that the ISSB is drawing on. And last slide is literally just a quick architecture. It sums up the previous 2 slides, but it just highlights where those various attributes that the board is tentatively going to consider as content in their exposure draft. So the point of this is continuing your work with the TNFD content, the capacity building, I think is essential regardless of what you're preparing for right now, hopefully if it's S1 or S2 work, but equally preparing for the exposure draft and perhaps your feedback into the exposure draft when it comes out in October. Back to you, Khalid.
Thank you very, very much, Candice, for the update on this. And what we see is that a lot of work has been done by the TNFD Secretariat. And now I yield the floor to understand how we can use today's data, the existing systems that are in place to complement this. I will give the floor to my colleagues, Dr. Vian Sharif and Liesel van der Vijver-Blackman. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Khalid. It's great to be here speaking on behalf of Nature Alpha to give you guys a little bit of a taste for just how much the nature data space has evolved over the last couple of years, and also kind of some suggestions on ways that you might start to implement that within your own risk considerations. Next slide, please. So first, just as a rundown, kind of to look at how the space has changed. Kind of 3 to 5 years ago, as you can imagine, it was very proxy heavy. So we didn't have any really specific metrics, a lot of basing off certain things rather than looking at actually what is going on the ground. The other thing as well as you can see from this kind of heat map diagram is that the kind of considerations were very much at the sector average level. Those considerations are very useful, and considering the materiality of different sectors is something that very much comes into nature risk considerations now. However, as we've learned, actually moving towards the asset level of the operations to understand as a first pass and then build sector impact on top of that is a way in which the space has evolved. And also, obviously, granularity has massively increased. Developments in science and innovation, from remote sensing to increased investment in nature risk research, has meant that now we have a lot more granularity and understanding of the interface of company operations with nature. So to that end, as you can see, kind of from an example of some of our software, we have asset level and geolocated nature risks. And what that means is that from just an asset location and an ISIN of a company, you can now understand across lots of different softwares what is the interface of nature for that company, i.e. for a certain mine, is it close to a key biodiversity area? Is it in a water stressed area? This is also then layered across impacts and dependencies. So a great example of this is data centers. So data centers are dependent on water around the surrounding area to cool a lot of the operations, but that also means that they're having a very large impact on the surrounding area by decreasing the ability of the ecosystem to provide water. All of these then come together to provide risk for the company, an operational risk, a deficit potentially in the future if that ecosystem service of water provision is altered by the activities of the company, be that a data center, be that a mine. What this then enables is, as we've seen from Candice's brilliant presentation on kind of where the TNFD has come, that this type of data, asset level, location specific, allows companies within their own risk management to be a lot more policy aware than they were 3 to 5 years ago, purely because of the increase in information that we have, and we're able to see where the biggest impacts are happening. Next slide, please. So within that, just to give you an idea of what sits underneath these data sets. So the kind of first port of call for all of this is data layers. So scientifically ratified, regionally specific geospatial layers. That could be anything from IBATs, key biodiversity areas, or areas of threat abatement for species, to water stressed areas, to, for example, one very specific for the UAE, mangrove occurrence and how that's changed over time. Giving these layers on top as the kind of first idea helps us to understand what nature is currently in place, what is happening at each of these locations. Then the second step is geolocation. So every single asset for that company placed within an asset locations database. And what that means is, as you can see from this kind of screenshot, is where you have certain hotspots of assets, as it were, lots of operations, you can see whether it makes that hotspot a material hotspot for you. If you have lots of mining operations that are very close to key biodiversity areas, that's going to be an area where nature risk is concentrated. And this ability to geolocate with layers also means that not just nature risk, but also climate risk, physical risk in general, transition risk start to be considered by being based on regionally specific information. And as you can see, the result is a step change from where we were before, from where we've come from climate and physical risk, being able to see specific risk at each individual asset, not just across all operations and not just across the sector. Next slide, please. And so finally, kind of overview of how we make this data visible. So the same portfolio under older methods, again, meant that nature exposure was hidden in sector averages. It was very difficult to pull out differences between one company. As we know, two mining companies with very similar revenue splits, very similar impacts, might actually be dealing with their mitigation of their nature risk in completely different ways. And under older methods, they would have been considered the same. Whereas as we move towards today, there's lots more differentiation between that. Like I said as well, hotspots are invisible. It's very difficult to understand where the hotspots of risk are if you don't know where the risk is in the first place. And also little basis to act under this. If it was very generalised and not specific, it's very hard to see a compelling case to bring to the board, to bring to the head of sustainability, to understand how to shift that and to consider nature risk. Whereas with today's data and today's capabilities, as I said, exposure is visible asset by asset. Assets can be ranked by what nature risk scores they have and an understanding of where in specific areas that score might mean different things. There's also a basis to act via company benchmarking as an example, understanding where companies fall in nature risk considerations to their peers within their sector is very helpful to understand with portfolio analysis. And again, more of the provision of a clear basis to act. The gap and the challenge that we now have is usage rather than availability. Learning by iterating is the next step. So there might not be the perfect data for your use case, but with the large amount of data that's out there, it's now the time to develop work streams with the data that's there at the moment and work through partnerships like this one to understand, okay, how can we use this data to begin our nature risk considerations? So next slide, please. I'll now pass over to our founder and president, Lian Sharif, to just give a bit of an overview of how we actually quantify the materiality of nature-related risk.
Thanks so much, Lisa, and a real pleasure to be with you all today. Right since the start of this development of the data piece, the question has been asked, how do we understand whether nature-related risks are material and where are they material? And so with this in mind, we've been relentlessly focused on addressing this issue. A couple of years back, we began our investigation into this from a research perspective. So understanding whether these elements like water stress, biodiversity and land use, ecosystem degradation actually did or could have a material financial impact on a company's operations. So we built this from the bottom up, and we tried to understand whether we could find anything in our research that could understand the interaction of two variables: a firm's operational dependency on ecosystem services. So where is this firm operating and what is going on in that particular location? And then the measured degradation of ecosystems at the firm's physical asset location. So really the intersection of a company with the natural world. And what we found was that indeed we could start to isolate some of these factors. And how we quantify that in the financially material sense is the so what for so many of us around this table, whether you are operating within a corporate or whether you're operating in a financial decision-making capacity, actually being able to explain, right, I can understand exactly what sort of trend I'm facing, whether it comes to increased OPEX, CapEx, degradation of the demands I need to have delivered to me from this ecosystem. That is all going to impact financially on this operation that I am looking at into the future. Next slide, please. And so we can make this research available to you all on this call afterwards, but really what we're looking at here are these building blocks when we're looking at financial materiality. Step one is to understand the intersection of dependency, my building that I'm about to construct, the operation or the data center that I'm thinking about building. What dependencies do those assets require to actually operate effectively, not just today, but into the future? And then what we need to understand is, in that environment, which we can do given the data that Liesel's shown, we can understand, okay, water stress is increasing, soil quality is degrading. Not only that, but key biodiversity areas are right adjacent to that area, and they're also degrading. So how is that going to affect the services I need from nature to actually run my operation? But that's not enough. What we also need to understand is, if we do take these elements into account, what is company X doing versus company Y? How are we managing those risks? Is there a dedicated plan in place to mitigate those risks of dependency and scarcity so that we know that we can protect this operation or more effectively manage this operation into the future? And we're going to hear from a case study thinking about exactly these elements. And really, it's this combination. First of all, understanding the intersection of dependency of an operation on the natural world and the scarcity of those services being provided to run that operation, number one, looking at that over time. And then secondly, how are those risks that have been identified going to be managed into the future to ensure a successful and resilient operation? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Liesel and Dr. Vian, for the very informative presentation on data. We also received one question via the chat box asking whether or not what we mean by adoption. Is it legally implemented, focused on disclosures? So when we say adoption, we do not mean that TNFD has been legally implemented or made mandatory. What we refer to when we say adoption is that organizations has chosen to use the TNFD recommendations in some form, whether it's assessing nature-related dependencies via LEAP or integrating them through existing risk management and decision-making processes. So at a more advanced stage, they may also choose to disclose against the TNFD recommendations. So with that said, we do not mean this in a very legally amplified manner. Please feel free to also add further questions into the chat box. I will now yield the floor to my colleague Vito from Amia Power to discuss the presentation. Vito, the floor is yours. If you can share your screen, please. Thank you very much. Vito, I think you're on mute.
Can you tell me if you are able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe can I ask Zara to support, because I think she has also my presentation. For some reason, I'm not able to share.
Of course. Zara, may you share the screen with Vito's presentation, please?
Okay, perfect. So I think we can start. So first of all, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name is Vito Saluto. I am the head of ESG for AMIA Power. And today I want to take you on a journey that I personally navigated during the last 2 years. And it's about AMIA Power, that is a UAE-based renewable energy developer based here in Dubai, where we have decided to tackle one of the most urgent and overlooked dimension of the sustainability, particularly our relationship with the nature, and crucially how we have translated this in a commitment using the TNFD LEAP approach. That is exactly what I'm going to speak today. Usually, when we think about renewable energy, of course, we celebrate the obvious win, like zero emission, energy independence, climate friendly. But this is, to be honest, a common mistake. In reality, renewable energy is not only, clean and green, but also when it comes to the construction and the development, of course, you need to highlight that there are a functioning ecosystem and there is dependencies between the projects and also the ecosystem that are around the project itself. So if this these projects are poorly designed, this can damage the ecosystem, the nature. So just think, for example, solar farms that use a lot of hectare of lands, or even wind installation, wind turbines that are located in critical birds corridor. So today, through this presentation, I hope to show you how we have done like integrated the nature-related risk assessment into our project life cycle, using also one project as a sample, as a case study. And then, of course, I hope you will see how TNFD is not just a checkbox or compliance exercise, but essentially is an operational and also financial material that help you to in the energy transition, as we have done. So next slide, please. Okay, so let me start introducing with AMIA Power. Who we are, as I said before, we are based in Dubai, and we operate across the three continents: Africa, Middle East, and emerging Asia. We are not newcomers in the renewable. We own, develop, build, and operate renewable energy projects in a genuinely diversified portfolio. And then we use several technologies, among including solar, wind, battery storage, water desalination, also powered by renewable energy, of course. Our footprint, as you can see, is approximately 20 gigawatt in a project pipeline across 6 countries. And then we are, our company is made by over 250 professionals, again, spread across all the geographies where we operate. Our mission is to direct accelerated energy transition across the region where we operate by delivering sustainable and affordable energy solution. The word sustainable for us is not just a marketing language, as you have opportunity to see later, but it's just in our DNA to an integrated business that brings together the technical aspect and necessity through local presence, deep stakeholder engagement as well, and alignment with the sustainable international standards. When our chairman founded the company, he understood something that was fundamental. So renewable energy is not just truly green, how we can demonstrate and develop the project in a responsible way, without causing harm to the nature or limiting the harms. And that philanthropy, to be honest, has driven every strategic decision that has been taken in the company around governance, finance, and environmental management. Next slide, please. Yeah. So let me briefly explain you the technology mix that we use. First of all, solar, as you know, solar power is our foundation technology. It's scalable. The costs have collapsed a lot over the last decade, and there are continuously improvement in the efficiency of the panels. So we deploy the utility scale solar, optimizing the solution for long-term reliability. From another perspective, solar has a lower biodiversity risk, but in some way can be also critical, especially when we consider the land that this solar farm are occupying. Sometimes might be even agricultural land or forest land. So definitely is something that we consider from a land use prioritization. Then onshore wind, so wind on the land, is a technology that we'll focus today through the business case I will show you later. Wind is a mature technology, very cost effective, and offer also very stable solution. However, this is where many developers stumble. Indeed, the wind projects can intersect, sometimes overlap with critical habitats or migratory corridors, as is the sample I will show you later, and also sensitive species in ways that demands rigorous assessment and mitigation. Finally, we have also the battery storage. It's essentially for maintaining grid stability and enable also higher renewable energy penetration. And also from an environmental perspective, BESS occupies a very small land footprint. So it's much more friendly than the previous two technologies. If you place close to solar and wind, of course, you create a great energy efficiency cluster. Finally, water desalination. Water desalination usually are powered by renewable energy in our model. So essentially, this technology is particularly relevant, I think, in the Middle East and also part of Africa where there is a scarcity of water. Of course, and there are impact in this case also in the marine ocean ecosystem. Each technology, as you understand in a nutshell, like carry out nature-related dependency and impact profile. Understand this trade-off actually means manage the technology and the projects in a responsible way. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little bit of the geographic footprint, and easy like to understand that we operate across these three macro regions. And to be honest, actually there are even other countries where we are in a very early stages of development that I have not included in this map. As you can see, this is not just a geographic spread for the sake of it. It reflects actually the reality that the renewable energy development must follow resources and markets. But also it means that the ecosystem of ecological significance vary a lot. There is a lot of variance. As you can see, we are spanning from Red Sea flyway to Sahel transition zone, East African wetlands, also Central Asian steppe. So each of these regions contains species and also, you know, particular local context, and like there are also lenders and, you know, investors that are applying very stringent environmental standards that we work with. So this diversification for us means like it's an imperative. It's an imperative to follow the environmental standards to make sure that we have a systematic framework that allow us to identify, assess, manage nature-related risk and opportunity. And this is exactly where TNFD comes from. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is a little bit our journey, and I hope it might be of inspiration for a few of you, at least. Like this is exactly how the story of our strategy, risk have born. And then I don't want to hide that has been also obstacle during the way. But essentially what happens in 2024, we made a decision to become a TNFD adopter as a natural progression of the work that we are already undertaking on environmental and social risk management. Exactly as I told you before, majority of our projects are financed by international lenders, including World Bank, IFC, and many other DFI, Development Financial Institution. So we have already established in the corporate processes for assessing and managing the environmental risk. So when come TNFD, we saw essentially an opportunity to build from this existing foundation and review actually our policies, our procedures, and make sure that our structure was consistent with how or in nature-related dependent impact, risk, also opportunities are considered both at corporate level, but especially for projects. Additionally, we identify several converging factors in this decision. So first of all, as an investor, also lender expectation, I worked personally over 20 years on this field, and I've seen during these 20 years how the biodiversity, especially of nature consideration, are increasing over the last 20 years, right? As of today, multilateral development banks, DFI, even corporate shareholder are increasing the rigor across the biodiversity, requesting continuously disclosure, transparency, reporting. So it's not anymore just I do a plan, I just have a mitigation, and that's it. I want to see how systematic risk assessment are done. As some of our lenders already have brought to have the concept that the nature disclosure actually is a factor that make it more easy, probably the financing condition. So we saw in that an opportunity. So additionally, as you can see, we are developing projects, especially in emerging markets, and there are several factors that can destroy the economy of the projects, especially if you don't take this in consideration at the right time. So having this systematic approach that is also supported by TNFD make us doing the right decision at the right time. So we do a proper screening of the projects, proper site selection, pre-feasibility studies. So we learned through the hard experience actually that even a 500 megawatt wind farm seated in the wrong location can add even, I don't know, 18 months, 24 months of permitting and millions of dollars of mitigation cost. So this TNFD LEAP approach gives us the discipline to ask a hard question upfront. And then another reason why we decided to go on the market for TNFD was also competitive positioning. So again, we were already well placed by what we have already in house, but at the same time, we saw TNFD was gaining traction in the market, was basically present in an international sustainable dialogue. And we have seen that also very few renewable energy developer had formally adopted it. So we saw an opportunity to become a first mover, to build the credibility, and honestly also to differentiate in the market of the renewable energy. So in 2024, we became adopter. 2025, we have our first TNFD report. At the time, it was just a standalone report. And this year, what we have done is to fully integrate the TNFD disclosure requirement into our sustainability report, as we believe it's the way forward. So just don't consider nature as a standalone or a separate topic, but integrate with the rest of the function. So since this year, we'll integrate in our sustainability report. I anticipated that has been also obstacle, and again, I don't want to hide them, but initially, especially when we have to launch the TNFD adoption, we had some in-house contracts with also management, because they thought initially that we were already sufficient with what we have announced, with the data availability that we have in the company. But to be honest, we have seen that the necessity to move ahead. We did several business case where exactly cost, time, and money are put up front, and then the TNFD approach actually would be the good solution for us. Then also there have been some methodological uncertainty when we start moving actually in 2023, 2024, actually we became adopter. Still there were no guidance on our sector, on power generation. They came a bit later. So initially was, of course, some uncertainties if go or not go for TNFD. And then finally was also another issues on integrating, how integrated TNFD within our existing system, environmental and social management system. So in this case, we did like an analysis of how governance, risk, also how planning financial processes can all survive on the same platform. And so this integration work was a bit complex initially, but finally it worked. Yes, I think we can move maybe to the next slide. Okay, so this is our LEAP approach as a company. Let me explain like step by step these things. So essentially what we try to do is to put together an approach where we identify the dependency across our system, how it is like built. So each step is measured through the impact and dependency. Locate is about like seeing the intersection between business and nature, where our projects are located geographically. And then evaluate, it's like how we apply standardized risk screening to understand which nature related issues matter most. Finally, assess. So it means go deep on the things. So doing an assessment of your projects, evaluate, running them through ecological and financial risk model. And finally, prepare. Prepare is the part of the mitigation hierarchy, where we analyze what we can do, like say, to reduce the risk. So avoid, minimize, restore, or even offset. And to be honest, in the business case that I will present today, we experience all of them. So in this slide, you can see actually how like that we reckon that something that not all renewable energy developer actually have full internalized. So it means that the renewable energy projects both depend but also interact with the nature. This is a two-directional relationship, and it's material, to be honest. We depend on nature through several pathways. We need sustainable land for with appropriate hydrology, solar radiance, wind resources, and water availability. Our project operate in and rely also in healthy ecosystem. A wind farm, for example, is a degraded habitat, can be a degraded habitat, and so we need to have more challenges in getting permitting. We benefit from ecosystem services, like, for example, water filtration, pollination, erosion control, climate regulation. This underpin the local economies and communities around the projects. And simultaneously, our project development interact also with the nature. If not managed, can cause also even impact. We use land, for example, that might otherwise host biodiversity and ecology. We build and operate, so our activities only of construction and operation can even disturb wildlife, habitat, fragment of ecosystem. We modify water regime to water desalination and the project water needs. So in a nutshell, there are several impacts. The renewable energy sector often tell us, like, I simplified the story. We are replacing a coal plant with a solar farm, and we are positive by definition. This is true on carbon, but it's not the full story. It doesn't consider exactly the nature question. So if your solar farm is built, for example, on critical habitat without a biodiversity offset, or if your wind project decimate a raptor population without compensation, at that point you are really harming the nature, the biodiversity, and also the climate. These things are completely connected, totally connected. Our approach actually is about the complexity. So we actually try to put all the things together, identify and assess nature-related dependencies, impact, risk, opportunity through the project life cycle. And when I say avoid, means really not doing project in area where, like, there are several risks on, for example, lands, on biodiversity, on the nature in general. So this is not only theoretical for us, and we'll see later as an example of our project in Egypt. So next slide, please. This is slide, I want to just show how, like, the machinery work. So essentially, we put in the middle, at the center of our strategy, the management system. This is not a new management system, but we made it more robust by adopting also TNFD in our company. So we did some retrofit to make sure that we add the biodiversity risk assessment at the pre-feasibility stage, so very early. And we integrated nature-related risk metrics into our project decision-making, embedding exactly biodiversity specialists in project development from day one. Our team itself now is composed by several specialists. We have also a biodiversity manager in-house that take care about this aspect since day one of development of projects. So as you can see there, we have like put some logo of some of the tools that we use for the project development. So you can see the biodiversity IBAT filter, risk filter that usually is like served to combine location data with the ecosystem map. Then IBAT probably is the most famous, that map project area, critical habitat, endangered species that are located close to our projects. AviStep is probably the last arrived. It's like a tool provided by BirdLife. It's not present in all region, but at least we use in the region of our business case that we show you later in Egypt. And then ArcGIS, that is the platform that used to overlap all these sensitive ecological areas. So we can go next slide, please. Okay, so yes, so we can start now to explain a little bit our business case. So this is a project wind farm that we built and is located in Egypt. So particularly this project is called Amunet. Amunet is a name of a goddess of ancient Egypt that means like hidden or invisible. This is like the idea to have a fitting name for a project that takes into one of the most ecological significant area. I say this because also the Red Sea is the region where there is an important migratory flyway that goes from Russia, Finland till South Africa. So imagine millions of birds migrating every year, twice per year, from north to south, south to north. So it's an important ecosystem. Actually, many people understand the ecosystem when we talk about land, for example, forests, hills, mountains, or marine ecosystem like river, lakes, sea, but very few things that also ecosystem is what is above us, like the sky. That is also an ecosystem for all the avifauna. So this project is a project that we have developed 3 years ago, and now today is in operational phase. As you can see, it's located in Red Sea Governorate in Egypt. If you are familiar, it's not far from a city called Ras Gharib. The particularity of this that is the government of Egypt have given to the Red Sea an importance in terms of development of renewable energy projects, specifically wind. So they consider this area very, attractive for developers. And this is true because effectively it's very windy. There is a fantastic wind, but the fact is that also overlap from a biodiversity perspective with this flyway. Particularly, our plot was also overlapping with an IBA, that is the Gebel El-Zet important biodiversity, bird and biodiversity area. It is also a key biodiversity area formally recognized by global conservation bodies. So maybe we can go next slide. So as I said, like locate we saw before, now we go to evaluate. So what we have done in this project, besides all the tools that I presented before from our biodiversity, the desktop level, we have also done a lot of good job on the ground. We established 8 vantage points positioned on hilltop overlooking the project area. Each vantage point have a view of 360 degrees, extending up to 2.5 kilometers, ensuring essentially that we can complete the coverage of all the projects that has 77 turbines. And then we did 3 years of monitoring, approx 3 years. So we did two complete years across three years, 2021, 2022. Let me translate those in numbers. So we have trained ornithologists spending hundreds of hours in the field, systematically recording bird movements, flight heights, flock size, and behavior across the seasonal migratory cycles. The monitoring reveals substantial variation in bird passage pattern across the years and the season. A migratory pattern shifted. Time changes, of course, flocking behaviors also is evolved. We compared this pattern against historical migration data and also ran a collision risk modeling. So the collision against the wind turbine and the blades of the turbines we installed. So we try to make analysis in order to identify the probability of collision risk. So given the turbine specification, also rotor height, all the technical data, let's say, the bird speed profile and the observed passage rate. So our model predicted that without mitigation, we would see fatalities that again would be important for this migratory route. The question then became, can we reduce the risk to acceptable risk? And this is like where we have on the next phase. So next slide, please. That is the assessment. So this is where the TNFD discipline really shows its value, I believe. We didn't just say, okay, there are birds, here we are the turbines, and that is a problem. So, but actually, we systematically assess the magnitude and nature of each risk. So we started to identify 192 bird species that used to overfly, to fly away the Red Sea Governorate, and also specifically where is our project. This is our full environmental component list. And every species that could potentially fly over, interact with our project. Then we applied a sensitivity screen, so it's in 2 criteria, so vulnerability, but also the relative importance. And then this gives us the sensitivity. So the sensitivity screening narrowed the species from 192 up to 34, from low to moderate and high risk. But to be honest, 34 species were still to manage comprehensively. So we need to further narrow down and do prioritization. So we conducted ecological risk assessment, looking at collision vulnerability indicator, population level significance, flight height, flock size, also collision risk model prediction. This rigorous filters allow us to narrow down up to 10 species with a major or moderate risk. Then at that point, our project, as I said before, are financed by IFC, by international lenders. So actually, maybe you might be aware, IFC is one of the most important criteria standards when it comes to the biodiversity risk management, especially in development finance. And so there is where we did the critical habitat assessment. So IFC particular have five criteria. Sorry, we noted that like by doing analysis that we trigger like one of the criteria. So particularly the species like when you have more than 10,000 individuals of bird species overflying your project or with a potential collision, there is a possibility that you are triggering a critical habitat, and that was our case. So we analyzed all the threshold, and we noted that 5 of these species actually passed the threshold. So finally, the decision was to trigger a no-net loss for 5 species and a net gain for additional 5 species. And this, as you can see later, will have consequences for add consequences for us, especially for financial model. So next slide. Okay, so this is like the preparation, and where we have put in place the mitigation hierarchy at all 4 levels for ARNet. So we deployed basically all of them. So first of all, avoid. So when we finalized the design of the turbine, we have removed the turbine. We excluded the turbine from the KBI that I said before that was overlapping for approximately 1 square kilometer. So we established additional 3-kilometer buffer from the KBI, make sure that the area was completely safe. Then minimize, because we have put in place an active turbine management program, so that we use real-time radar monitoring during the peak migratory period the area of the project, and the turbines automatically shut down in the moment that there is like a warning of flocks like approaching the project. This solution costs approximately 2 million. Of the solution of the radar, so quite expensive. Then bird monitoring program. So we did pre-construction survey, but also surveys during construction, and also post-construction definitely, to ensure that impact are limited, and continue to study the behavior of the bird species. And then we've put in place a fatality monitoring program, carcass search program. So we have ground staff regularly conduct this activity and doing a massive reporting every month. And then we have a shutdown on demand. So these people, the observer also have, according to certain criteria, have the opportunity to call for a shutdown of the turbine whenever there is any issues with the radar, and where we advise a collision risk. So predictive shutdown on demand actually serve us to avoid to have this impact and fatalities. And then finally, we have also restoration offset. I think for this we have been quite, I would say, pioneer for the area. Certainly for the Red Sea Governorate, but I would say for the North Africa at least. So we have become ourselves like a case study in conservation ambition, because for the first time for a wind turbine, for a wind farm, we have done an offset compensation. So was to prove the net gain. So this was a very delicate work that we have done in collaboration with special consultants, environmental consultant, ornithologist. There is a company called Biodiversity Consultant with who we have worked together. They're based in UK actually. So there we have evaluated, essentially we have, as I said before, we have to preserve 10 species, 5 non-net loss, another 1 net gain. So for the 1 net gain, we have to identify like conservation projects that were not necessarily located in Egypt, but can be based abroad. And this is the table that you can see. We analyzed the 19 offset option across Northern Europe, Mediterranean Sea, Africa, even the Middle East. And we identify some good option. Ultimately, we commit to funding 4 conservation projects that were the projects that were preserving the species triggered in our project. So in this case, the financial commitment was approximately $3 million over 10 years, spending across multiple partners, including BirdLife, RSPB, also other NGOs on biodiversity. Is expensive? Yes, definitely is expensive. But to be honest, this is a project that worth $750 million, generating over 500 megawatts, at zero carbon power. And if you do a comparison, it's approximately 0.4% of the capital cost, and all this to preserve the biodiversity. So again, it was not an easy decision. We, of course, we discussed with the senior management, with our lenders, but we understand that this is our slogan is not just we are renewable, we are good. No, like we want to say, okay, we have generated zero carbon power, but also deliver and conserve net conservation gain for species of global significance. So this has been a bit our logic. Next slide. Next slide is just a recap of how, like I explained, the LEAP approach for Amunet project and how it is linked to TNFD disclosure. So again, just summarize, locate. We have already identified the project. We identify an overlap with the KBI and with the flyway corridor, migratory corridor. Evaluate. So these are the tools that I presented you before, with who we have done the study, our age as well, avifauna monitoring, assessing. So we have done a collision risk modeling, a cumulative effect assessment, prioritization of VEC list, and then also critical habitat assessment determination. And then the preparation, that is what I explained to you before about the biodiversity action plan, active turbine monitoring program, offset program, and translocation plan. Next slide. Okay, so this is just to key takeaway. So we are at the end. So I would say, so first of all, what I feel to suggest is, first of all, TNFD is just not operationally, is it operationally feasible? No new tools are required. Too often, a company are a bit shy from framework like TNFD because they think that they require a new system or competencies. In reality, most mature developers, company, each one for its context, for each industry, of course, have already tools in place like a management system, environmental assessment done. So TNFD provides like a logic for integrating those existing tools with more rigor, probably, and definitely transparency. We didn't need to replace, for example, our ESMS, but just retrofit it to make sure that also include the integrated TNFD. The second, another consideration, lesson learned, from my perspective, the hard part was not the data collection. Once you are put in place, let's say your team, you have your structure in place, data collection is not the hard part, but from my perspective was most the analysis and the material assessment. So all the analysis that we have done, so understand what is material, what is not, analytical bridge between ecology and also like the financial part, of course. Third, in my view, LEAP close also a loop from systematic risk identification to bankable business decision, because it allows to unlock capital. As I said before, lenders, investors are more and more attracted, let's say, or require company developers like us to follow a natural approach, a disciplined approach like TNFD. Early stage screening, another things definitely prevent late stage surprise. As I said before, there is it's not rare that you start a project and then later when you start your biodiversity study, realize that costs a lot. And this can destroy economy of a project, to be honest. So early stage screening definitely is very, very helpful in decision making. Then the mitigation hierarchy apply universally, but of course the implementation can vary according to the context, the industry. There are no pre-packed solution. Every project has to be studied. Every project has their own peculiarities. I believe that stakeholder engage with biodiversity conservation organization, for example, helps a lot because they have more understanding and can provide more information about the area. Collaboration is always a good thing. And finally, nature-related disclosure and also business strategy are inseparable. As of now, as we are progressing, all of us are projected through a climate change strategy. We are transitioning between from coal projects, coal technology, oil and gas to new that are like renewable, for example. So nature-related is really a must from our perspective. Yeah, I stop here, and if there is any question, I'm happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Vito. We do have a question, and that is, do we know the global impact of all nature-related mitigation adaptation on AMIA projects' return on equity?
Yeah, we have this. We have this because every project follow the same screening. So we have done this across project. I cannot tell you now which is the value, but I can provide you later. But definitely this is something that we have on board. Okay,
fantastic. Perhaps we can share this afterwards. With. Great. So thank you so much, Vito, for your presentation. And it really shows us the conversations that we've had earlier by the previous speakers and how AMIA Power has implemented that in practicality. Colleagues, AMIA Power is an example of an existing UAE company, amongst others that are already adopting TNFD. So with that said, let me draw together just a few threads from what we have heard today. We started with a very broad question. What does nature actually mean for your company? And I think that we have seen in this afternoon that the answer itself was made more practical. So TNFD has given us a way of structuring the questions. Nature Alpha has shown us that the data is there and increasingly allows us to identify where dependencies, impacts, and risks sit. And AMIA Power has shown us what happens when you bring those two things together and apply them to a real asset. So as we look towards the second half of the year, let me leave you with a couple of invitations. Firstly, for those of you who are beginning to ask the questions about your own portfolios, sectors, or assets, please come and sit with us. We'd be very happy to go over and provide further capacity building sessions where needed. Secondly, we'd also be delighted to welcome you to the Nature Finance Academy happening at Q4 of this year. The Academy is intended to take exactly the conversations we have started today and go further, working through the concepts, the data, and the practical application in much greater depths so that institutions can begin building the capability internally. you can send us an email to do this, and we'll be happy to send the registration link. With that, I will have Candice voice over a very important survey that's happening. Candice, if you would like to go over this.
Yeah, I just want to thank Vito, because I feel like I learned a lot more, and I might have to contact you afterwards because I'm going to be in Egypt on the 8th of September quickly, and that could be a really great use case to share. So the status report survey is exactly this. It's starting to get feedback. This is our second status report, but the survey is a key input. So my ask is, it actually closes tomorrow, but there will be a little window to complete it over the weekend, and early on Monday morning, UAE time. But we effectively are asking for public commentary with regard to TNFD uptake, the process, how organizations have learned through this process, how they're applying LEAP, and various attributes that we'll be including in our status report, which will be launched on the 21st of September during Climate Week New York. We already have the dates and the times, but the invites will follow shortly, which we can share with Khalid, and those can be sent through your events calendar of things to come. There are obviously a lot of events happening in the latter half of this year. And our second topic, which I feel like Vito did a great job at helping promote exactly what TNFD adoption means to an organization in terms of decision-making, project decision-making, and the crucial aspects that he raised around those who are helping finance quite a lot of this work. So it's not, again, just about the disclosure. It is the disclosure commitment, but it is also a lot of that disclosure work is being fed into parties who are helping finance projects, who are asking for more depth and more detail. And certainly we're seeing examples of that. So adoption is voluntary, but we have a deadline, 9th of October, where we will be announcing our latest update of all of our global adopters during an event on the 15th of October during PRI in person. And we've critically chosen that moment because that is the biggest stakeholder group of asset managers and asset owners that collectively get together once a year. The PRI hosts an in-person forum that week. Thanks, Khalid. Sorry, one more. Yeah, I think I've covered those. All good.
Yeah, great. Thank you very, very much. And thank you everyone who has joined the discussion today. Really appreciate your participation. Again, if you'd like further information, please reach out to me via email. We will be more than happy to sit down with you. And again, we'll send out an email to everyone who participated on the links and answering further questions that you've had in the chat. So thank you to the TNFD Secretariat, Candice, and Nature Alpha, Dr. Vian and Liesl, and of course, Amir Power, Vito. And we look forward to the next session and the next convening happening towards the next half of the year. And I conclude this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.